Rachel Miller's small apartment was on the third floor of an old apartment building, where the gray walls bore the marks of time. The clock on the bedside table flashed 5:30 a.m., and a familiar sound rang out again. The sound of the old alarm clock she had heard for many years. Rachel rubbed her eyes, trying to shake off the fatigue weighing down on her eyelids after a sleepless night worrying about unpaid bills. She stretched, slowly stood up, and stepped into a new day. A day identical to hundreds of days before. When Rachel stepped out of the apartment building, it was still dim outside. Winter was approaching, causing the cold air to cut like a knife. She pulled her thin coat tightly around herself, and her old shoes creaked with small squeaks each time they touched the paved road. The street was still deserted, with only a few early workers hurrying off to work. The quiet atmosphere was broken by the clattering sound of a bus passing by, gently rattling the glass doors of the small shops on both sides of the road. Rachel shuddered, but not just because of the cold. It was also a feeling of despondency as she thought about the long day ahead, with hot cups of coffee, hurried orders, and small coins placed on the counter as a reward for her perseverance. The small cafe where Rachel worked was tucked away in a corner of the street, between two shops that had long been closed. A wooden sign hung limply on the glass door, its pale yellow letters nearly faded after years of enduring wind and rain. When she pushed open the door and stepped inside, a wave of warmth hit her face, carrying the familiar aroma of freshly roasted coffee and freshly baked pastries. Rachel greeted Sam, the owner of the cafe, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and gentle eyes. He was wiping the counter, smiling when he saw her step in. "Good morning, kiddo. You're here early today?" Rachel shrugged and placed her purse under the counter. "Just as always, Sam. You know, I have no reason to sleep in." Sam chuckled softly, but said nothing more. He knew Rachel was a hard worker, and her life had never been easy. For her, working was not only a way to earn money, but also a way to keep her mind from being swept away by endless worries about the future. The morning passed slowly. The first customers arrived at the cafe, a group of truck drivers who often stopped by before starting their long journeys. A middle-aged woman who liked to read the morning paper with a small cup of cappuccino, and an old man who always ordered the same thing, a croissant and a cup of black tea. Rachel smiled and greeted them, recalling their familiar orders without anyone needing to remind her. To her, this cafe was not only a workplace but also a part of her life, a small yet peaceful world amid the bustling city. But no matter how familiar it was, reality did not change. The meager salary, the ever-mounting bills, and her dream of opening her own restaurant remained only distant hopes. Rachel had once wanted to become a professional chef, to create unique dishes, but that dream was gradually buried under the burdens of life. She could only smile, welcoming customers with a radiant appearance while feeling empty inside. When the clock neared noon, the cafe door opened again, bringing with it a gust of cold wind. Rachel looked up from the coffee machine and was immediately drawn to the man who had just walked in. He was unlike anyone who had ever come to this cafe before. His perfect gray suit, his shiny leather shoes, and his demeanor of authority made him look completely out of place in the cozy but modest space of the cafe. Rachel could sense a brief silence as several other customers also noticed the appearance of this man. He was not the kind of person who usually came to places like this. The man walked toward the counter, his sharp eyes not cold at all. He stopped in front of Rachel, carefully observing her as if evaluating something. Finally, he spoke, his voice deep and strong. "Excuse me, are you Rachel Miller?" Rachel blinked, surprised by the question. She had never met him before. So how did he know her name? "Yes, I am Rachel," she replied, her voice a little hesitant. "Who are you?" The man paused for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Then he extended his hand. "I am Thomas Reed. I have an offer that could change your life forever." Rachel felt her heart beat faster. An offer? From a stranger who looked as if he had stepped out of a world completely different from hers? Curiosity and worry mingled in her mind. But something told her that this man would change everything, and she could not have imagined that her life was about to step into a completely new chapter. Rachel sat facing Thomas Reed, the man who, just a day ago, had been a completely unfamiliar name. In front of her, A thick envelope lay silently on the table like a strange object, carrying an invisible weight that pressed down on her slender shoulders. Although the cafe had gradually emptied, the space now contained only the faint sounds of a ticking clock on the wall and the soft clinking of knives and spoons against a porcelain cup from some distant corner. But for Rachel, everything seemed to be swallowed by the erratic pounding of her own heart. "I need someone I can trust, someone not connected to my world," Thomas said, his voice calm yet persuasive. "And I believe that person is you." Rachel swallowed hard. His words sounded like a promise, like a ticket out of a life she had grown too tired to endure. Yet at the same time, they also felt like a sentence, a golden shackle, a marriage without love, based solely on interests. She looked down at her own hands, rough-skinned, with calluses that had faded slightly, but never disappeared. Hands that had held serving trays for many years. Hands that had once cooked dishes she dreamed would one day become the signature creations in her own restaurant. But that dream, like these fingers, had gradually been eroded by time. Her eyes wandered, not looking at Thomas but through him, gazing into her own past. There were nights when Rachel lay awake beside the small kitchen table, under the dim light of an old lamp. Before her lay stacks of bills, glaring red numbers as if screaming out the hopelessness. The electricity bill, rent, the unpaid hospital bills for her mother. She had tried to manage, cutting back on everything possible. But no matter how exhausted she worked, the meager amount she earned was only like a drop in the ocean. She remembered the times she had to lie to her friends that she was busy working when they invited her out to dine, simply because she did not have enough money for a decent meal. She recalled the rainy days when she had to choose between walking more than 5 kilometers to save on bus fare or trying to borrow money from others. Such decisions might seem trivial to someone else, but to her, they were a full-blown battle. And the dream of becoming a chef. How long had it been since the last time she truly thought about it? In her childhood, she had loved standing in the kitchen with her mother, learning how to season food, imagining a small restaurant with a menu filled with dishes bearing her own signature. But when illness struck, everything became a luxury. She had to choose between pursuing her dream and taking care of her loved ones. And she chose responsibility. Those memories weighed heavily on her, making every word Thomas spoke echo in her mind. "I am not forcing you," Thomas said, as if he could read the conflict within her. "You may refuse right now, and I will leave. But I want you to understand that this is a rare opportunity, a life without the worry of money, a new beginning, a new beginning." That phrase made Rachel ache. Part of her wanted to laugh, to say that she did not need anyone else to help her, that she was used to fighting on her own. But another part, the weak part she had always tried to hide, whispered to her, "This is the only opportunity. If you refuse, will there ever be another escape?" She clenched her hands tightly, her breath coming in short gasps. Could she accept this without feeling that she had sold herself short? Could she live with the truth that she was entering a marriage not for love, but for money? Yet at the same time, if she refused, what awaited her ahead? Still sleepless nights due to debts, still endless toil and hardship. She looked at Thomas. This man appeared cold and distant, but in his eyes there was something different, a touch of seriousness, a hint of expectation. She did not know whether she could trust him, but one thing was certain. Her life would never change if she remained in the same position. Rachel took a deep breath. "I need time to think," she said, her voice soft yet resolute. Thomas nodded. "Of course, but remember, this opportunity will not wait forever." He stood up, leaving the envelope on the table. Rachel watched his back as he left the cafe, feeling as if that door not only closed behind him but also opened a new path in her life. She reached out and touched the envelope, feeling its thickness. It contained not only money or a contract, but also a future she had never imagined. Rachel did not know where her decision would lead her, but for the first time in many years, she felt that she truly had a choice. Rachel stood before the towering iron gate of the Reed mansion, a feeling of anxiety creeping into her heart. Just the night before, she had been a waitress in a small cafe, struggling with her meager salary. Now, with only one decision behind her, She was about to step into a luxurious world she had never dared to dream of. Yet, amid the dazzling light of this world, she could not shake the feeling of alienation and suffocation. A luxurious car carrying Rachel rolled along a white pebbled road, leading to an imposing mansion hidden behind a row of large maple trees. The gleaming marble columns and the exquisitely sculpted statues along the entrance made her feel as if she were stepping into a fairy tale palace. The heavy front door opened to reveal a grand hall, where a high ceiling and a gigantic crystal chandelier cast a sparkling glow throughout the space. An elderly butler, with a dignified demeanor and an immaculate uniform, bowed and greeted Rachel. "Welcome, Mrs. Miller. Please follow me. Your room has been prepared." Rachel silently followed him, her new high-heeled shoes causing her some discomfort. Previously, she was only accustomed to sneakers or flat shoes while working at the cafe. Each step on the marble floor echoed in the vast space, making her feel even more awkward. Her bedroom was on the second floor, with a large glass window overlooking a sprawling garden. Lush green trees, a clear pond, and a greenhouse full of vibrant flowers filled the view. The room was furnished with luxurious items: a large bed draped in soft silk, golden bedside lamps, and a gigantic wardrobe. Rachel stood silently in the middle of the room, feeling as if she were a lost soul. Soon after, a group of female servants appeared, wearing designer dresses that she had only ever seen on magazine covers. A young woman with a professional smile said, "We have prepared outfits for you. Mr. Reed wants you to choose a dress for tonight's party." Rachel looked over at the neatly arranged dresses on the bed. Bright red, deep blue, mysterious black. Each was so foreign to her simple style. She remembered the worn uniform of the cafe where she had once felt comfortable and familiar. For the first time, she realized that this change was not only about material things, but also a complete transformation of identity. After some hesitation, Rachel chose a modest cream-colored dress. The servant helped her put it on, adjusting every small detail. The dress hugged her figure perfectly, but when she looked at herself in the mirror, Rachel felt as if she were seeing someone else, a stranger, no longer the simple cafe waitress. That evening, Thomas appeared at her door, dressed in a stylish black suit. His eyes swept over Rachel, and a satisfied smile briefly appeared on his lips. "You look wonderful. Are you ready?" Rachel took a deep breath, trying to reassure herself. "I'm not so sure. I feel like I'm playing a role that doesn't belong to me." Thomas tilted his head, observing her. "You don't need to become someone else, Rachel. Just be yourself, but a better version of yourself. Let me help you get acquainted with this world." The dinner party was held in a large ballroom where powerful and wealthy people gathered. Elegant ladies in dazzling gowns and gentlemen with glasses of wine in hand engaged in confident, somewhat distant conversations. Rachel felt every eye fixed on her, scrutinizing her every gesture. She walked beside Thomas, feeling like a little sparrow lost among proud peacocks. An older woman with sharp eyes approached them. "Thomas, my dear, who is this?" Her voice sounded more curious than friendly. Thomas smiled and naturally placed his hand on Rachel's waist. "This is Rachel, my fiancée. She is very special." Rachel pursed her lips, trying to maintain a smile. She clearly felt the scrutinizing gaze of those around her. They did not need to say it, but she understood. They did not believe that she belonged to this world. The dinner passed heavily. Rachel was cautious in every word and gesture, yet she still felt out of place. When the party ended, she sighed with relief as she returned to her room. Looking at herself in the mirror, Rachel asked herself, "What am I doing here? Can I truly live in this world?" But then she remembered the money that could change her life, the dream of owning her own restaurant that she had buried for so many years. If this was the price she had to pay to escape poverty, perhaps she would learn to adapt. And so, the cafe waitress began her journey to become a millionaire's wife. A journey filled with challenges she had never imagined. The moon hung suspended in the night sky, its gentle light streaming through the lofty windows of the Reed mansion. In that still space, the soft sound of footsteps echoed on the gleaming marble floor. Rachel carefully descended the stairs, trying not to make any noise. The soft silk nightgown clung to her figure, and her hair flowed freely. She bit her lip as she passed through the expansive corridor, her heart racing as she approached the kitchen. She could not sleep. For weeks, she had tried to adapt to the luxurious life, with its glamorous parties and scrutinizing glances from the upper class. But tonight, she wanted only one simple thing: a little pastry and a cup of hot tea to soothe her mood. When the kitchen door opened, the gentle aroma of cinnamon and vanilla hit her nose. On the table, freshly baked pastries were neatly arranged on a silver tray. Rachel could not resist. She reached out and silently picked up a small, delicate pastry, her eyes sparkling like a child who had just discovered treasure. "I don't think you're the type to steal," a deep voice said as soon as Rachel took the first bite. She jumped, nearly dropping the pastry. Beside the door, Thomas stood there, his arms folded across his chest, his eyes gleaming with amusement. He was wearing a white short-sleeved shirt with the top button undone, revealing part of a firm neck. His slightly tousled black hair showed that he too could not sleep. Rachel quickly swallowed the pastry, feeling awkward. "I'm not stealing. I just took a little." "Ah, of course. That's a big difference." Thomas stepped forward, his eyes twinkling with a hint of a smile as he approached. Rachel glanced around, seeking a reasonable excuse. "I can't sleep. I need something to help me relax." Thomas looked at her for a moment, then said nothing further. He simply opened a cupboard and took out a teapot. "Then let me make you a cup of tea." Rachel was surprised. "You know how to make tea?" Thomas raised his eyebrows. "I'm not completely useless, you know." He turned on the stove, brought water to a boil, and then silently retrieved a box of herbal tea. His movements were quick and efficient, impressively skillful. Rachel leaned against the counter, watching him with an interested gaze. "I always thought you just had the butler do everything for you." "I can take care of myself when necessary," Thomas replied with a shrug. "I just haven't had many opportunities to do these little things anymore. When I was young, my mother always said that a self-reliant man shouldn't depend on others for the simplest tasks. Making a cup of tea is one of the few skills I've kept." Rachel fell silent as she observed him. This was the first time she had seen another side of Thomas, a simpler side. Not the powerful businessman she usually saw at meetings or glamorous events. When the water began to boil, he carefully poured it into a cup, steeped the tea bag, and waited for it to infuse. The gentle aroma filled the warm kitchen. He placed the cup of tea in front of Rachel. "Give it a try." She took the cup, inhaled deeply, and then sipped. The warm flavor filled her mouth, soothing all her worries. "Delicious," she said. Thomas smiled and pulled up a chair to sit opposite her. "Do you feel better?" Rachel nodded. "A little, thank you." A quiet moment passed between them. There were no longer any words of transaction, no trace of the forced nature of a marriage contract. There were only two strangers slowly becoming familiar with each other. Rachel looked down at the pastry in her hand. "Would you like to try one?" Thomas laughed and, reaching for one himself, took a small bite, raising his eyebrows in pleasant surprise. "Not bad," Rachel laughed. "I guess you don't usually eat sweets." "Not often, but I can make an exception tonight." They sat there, together enjoying the little pastries and their cup of hot tea, quietly savoring the rare moment unburdened by the outside world. Rachel looked at the man before her, not Thomas Reed, the powerful billionaire, but a man with whom she could truly converse and laugh. And for the first time, she wondered, could their relationship be something more than just a contract? The months living with Thomas in the luxurious Reed mansion gradually became a familiar loop for Rachel. She learned to adapt to glamorous parties, to the scrutinizing looks from the upper class, and to her role as a nominal wife. But then, everything began to change. At first, it was only small details that perhaps anyone could overlook. Every night, when she woke up in the vast room, the light from Thomas's study still shone through the door crack. At first, she thought that it was just those nights when he worked late. But then she noticed something strange. Every time she approached, his conversations fell silent immediately. One night, when she stood quietly outside the door, she heard Thomas's voice, low and tense. "I don't care how you do it, as long as it doesn't involve me. No, the plan must go on. Just do as we agreed." Rachel's heart tightened. Plan? What plan? And who are we? Thomas was not a man known for breaking his promises, at least not in the way he presented himself to Rachel. But recently, the romantic dinners they once shared had gradually disappeared. He began to be absent without notice, leaving behind terse messages such as, "Urgent work, don't wait for me." But those instances of urgent work became increasingly frequent, and the tension was evident on Thomas's face each time he returned. One evening, while the butler was preparing wine for the guests at the party, Rachel quietly flipped through Thomas's schedule book. But instead of the meeting she expected, the page was completely blank. No appointments were recorded. The charity event took place in the lavish space of a 5-star hotel. Rachel donned an expensive evening gown and walked arm in arm with Thomas, fully playing the role of a perfect wife. But while everyone cheerfully raised their glasses in toast, she felt that someone was watching her. When she stepped out of the ballroom to get some air, a stranger appeared from the shadows. "You do not belong to this world, Mrs. Miller." Rachel jumped, stepping back. "Who are you?" "Someone who knows you better than you know yourself." Rachel's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" The man shook his head. "Look carefully around you. Observe what Thomas is doing. Do not trust what he says. Otherwise, you will regret it." Before she could ask further, the man vanished into the crowd. The feeling of unease grew. One night, when Thomas hurriedly left the mansion, Rachel decided to sneak into his study. She knew it was wrong, but the haunting warnings would not let her stop. Thomas's desk drawer was locked, but when she tried to pull the bottom drawer, it unexpectedly opened. Inside was a thick set of documents, contracts, investment papers. And then she saw a letter with a red seal bearing her name. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The cold words on the page were like a knife thrust into her heart. Selected subject, Rachel Miller. Purpose, to secure the marriage in order to preserve the inheritance. Requirement, the subject must not be allowed to suspect. She felt as if the whole world was collapsing beneath her feet. When Thomas returned at dawn, Rachel was already sitting in the living room, the letter still lying on the table. He saw it and froze. The look in his eyes was not one of shock, but of the realization that his secret had been exposed. "Rachel," she clenched her hands, her voice trembling. "Why? Why would you do this?" Thomas took a deep breath, slowly approaching her. "It's not what you think." Rachel laughed bitterly. "Not what I think. You chose me only because I was a safe option. A pawn in your plan." Thomas looked at her, his eyes reflecting a hint of pain. "At first, yes, but now, everything has changed." Rachel shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Do you know how much I trusted you?" Rachel could no longer bear to hear any further explanations. She ran upstairs, packing her belongings in a frenzy. Thomas stood at the door, his hand clenched. "Rachel, don't go." She turned back, her voice choked with tears. "You said I was the only person you could trust, but you've never trusted me, have you?" Thomas did not reply, and that was the answer. Rachel left into the night, carrying a shattered heart. As the mansion's gate slammed shut behind her, she wondered, would she ever truly understand the man Thomas Reed was? Would anything he said to her ever be true? And most importantly, was this the end, or just the beginning of something even greater? Rachel clenched the envelope in her hand as she walked down the long corridor, its red carpet laid out before the mansion. Every step she took was resolute, as if she were counting the seconds before facing the truth she had just discovered. Her heart pounded so hard that she could almost hear it echoing in her head. The door to Thomas's office creaked open slightly, and the yellow light spilled out, forming a faint outline on the expensive carpet. She took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Thomas was sitting behind his desk, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, his hand loosely holding a glass of whiskey. His eyes appeared contemplative, but when he saw her, he set the glass down on the desk and immediately stood up. "Rachel." His voice was deep and cautious, as if he had anticipated that something was about to happen. Rachel did not reply. Instead, she walked to the desk, pulled out the documents from the envelope, and threw them down in front of him. The papers scattered across the dark wooden desk. Images of Thomas shaking hands with powerful men, murky financial transactions, and finally, an email that he himself had sent before coming to her. "I wasn't chosen because you trusted me. I was chosen because I am the most convenient pawn." Isn't that so? Her voice trembled yet was as sharp as a knife. Thomas looked down at the pile of papers, a flash of tension crossing his face. He slowly picked up the email, reading the lines as if he needed to confirm for himself that it was indeed his. But instead of rebutting, he simply closed his eyes and sighed. Rachel, let me explain. Explain? Rachel laughed bitterly. Who do you think I am? A puppet? A toy you can buy simply because I am poor and desperate? Thomas stepped forward one pace, but Rachel instinctively backed away, as if touching him would hurt her further. That's not it, he said, his voice growing deeper. In the beginning, yes, I needed an outsider, someone not connected to my world. But everything has changed. Changed? Rachel said through gritted teeth, her eyes welling with tears, though she refused to let them fall. Are you saying that now I'm no longer just a pawn? That your feelings are real? Thomas clenched his fist, his eyes darkening. Yes, Rachel laughed coldly, but it was not a laugh of joy. It was one of bitterness. Then why didn't you tell me sooner? Why did I have to discover the truth on my own? You had so many opportunities to tell me, but you chose silence. You let me believe that this was a fair arrangement, when in reality it was just a plan to protect your fortune. Thomas could not deny that. The naked truth lay between them like an unbreakable wall. Rachel, he softly called her name, but she shook her head. You lied to me, Thomas, not just once, but over and over. I began to trust you, began to think that maybe we could really... Her voice choked. She took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. But now I realize it was all just a setup. Thomas stepped closer, his eyes filled with pain. Rachel, I know I was wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but please listen to me. These past months were not a sham. I have changed. You made me change. I no longer care about money or power as before. What I care about is you. Rachel laughed dryly. So I must believe you just because you say so. I don't expect you to believe me right now. His voice became gentler. But if you leave right now, I won't stop you. Just remember one thing. I never wanted to hurt you. Rachel looked him straight in the eyes, her gaze filled with hurt, yet blazing with determination. That doesn't change the fact that you did. She turned away and walked quickly toward the door. But when her hand touched the doorknob, she suddenly froze. She had loved him. Despite her efforts to deny it, her heart still longed to believe that something real existed between them. But that trust had been betrayed. She turned back, her eyes resolute. Thomas, I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I know one thing. I can't stay here any longer. Thomas said nothing, only silently nodding. He understood that he no longer had the right to keep her. Rachel opened the door, and this time she walked away without looking back. The sound of the door closing behind her echoed in the silence of the vast mansion, leaving Thomas standing there, alone, with an unprecedented sense of loss. Rachel did not return to her old cafe immediately. Instead, she went back to her childhood home, once the most peaceful place. She sat by the old wooden table in the kitchen, her hand caressing the envelope that contained the secrets which had shattered her heart. For many days, she did not open it again. She had read it enough to understand that the past could not be changed. But what she needed to know now was not the past, but the future. Could she move on without thinking of Thomas? Had he truly changed as he claimed? She did not have an answer at that moment, but she knew one thing. This was the moment she had to choose her own path. Elsewhere in the city, Thomas sat in his office, staring at the wedding ring that Rachel was supposed to have worn for 6 months. But now it was just a meaningless object lying on the desk. For the first time in his life, he could not buy back what he had lost. And for the first time in his life, he feared that he had lost the one person who truly mattered. When Rachel left Thomas's mansion, everything had changed. The days spent in that spacious house were no longer a life of luxury or glamour, as she had once imagined. Everything became truly empty, and the atmosphere in the house grew much gloomier. Thomas was no longer the powerful man she had once known, the man whose single word could change a life. He had become a ghost in his own home, silent and reflective. Without Rachel, his life lacked warmth and genuine moments. In the days immediately following Rachel's departure, Thomas felt an emptiness he had never experienced before. He did not know what to do, nor whether he could continue on the path he had once set for himself. He missed the gentle conversations every morning, the short yet intimate dinners, and the times when they sat in silence together, simply knowing that the other was there. Thomas began to realize that all this time, he had been missing not only her for financial or reputational reasons, but he truly missed Rachel as a part of himself. He realized that she had touched his heart in a way he had never imagined. Therefore, as the emptiness weighed on him day by day, Thomas knew that he had to change. The world he was living in, with its negotiations and financial deals, was no longer the place he wanted to exist. He decided not only to change the way he worked, but also to change himself, to become a person whom Rachel could trust, love, and accept. Every day, Thomas gradually realized that to change, he needed to do things he had never done before. He began to re-examine his company, the opaque transactions he had participated in, the secrets he had kept hidden for so many years. He decided that he would no longer involve himself in those shady deals. Thomas began to cut off bad relationships within his company, shifting his focus to charitable projects and more positive social activities. He committed to using his assets to help impoverished women, those who had dreams but lacked the means to achieve them. He knew that only by truly changing from within could he make Rachel see him in a different light. One day, while Thomas was sitting in his office reviewing contracts and ongoing projects, he suddenly realized that it had been too long since he had done simple tasks himself as he used to. He remembered the times when Rachel had talked about her dream of opening a restaurant, the stories she shared about wanting to be a chef. Those stories still remained vivid in his memory. Every time he heard Rachel speak about the work she loved, he felt a part of him yearning to experience those simple things, even though he was not the kind of person who had the courage to pursue his own dreams. Thomas stood up from his desk, left his office, and went down to the mansion's kitchen. He was not a good cook, but he decided he would try to make a simple meal. He remembered that Rachel had once said that if she had time, she would make a simple dish like pasta with fresh tomato sauce. He began to gather the ingredients, trying to follow each step as she had described, even though these dishes were quite a challenge for him. As he began to boil water, chop tomatoes, and garlic, a strange yet warming feeling enveloped him. He realized that although his work was grand and filled with power, he could not find satisfaction in those pursuits. He felt like a puppet in his own life, controlled by money and fame. Now, standing in the kitchen, Thomas experienced the simplicity and freedom that Rachel had once shared with him. The aroma of the spices filled the space, and Thomas was unexpectedly overcome with a sense of relief. He recalled the early days when he and Rachel met, and the warm emotion she had brought into his life. He could not forget her gentleness, the way she cared for herself and those around her. Every time Rachel smiled, he felt as if his world became brighter. When the meal was finished, Thomas sat down alone at the dining table, but his heart was no longer empty. Although he knew that cooking this meal would not change everything immediately, at least it was a sign of change within him. He no longer wanted to continue living in a world solely of power and money. He wanted to become a truly trustworthy person, someone that Rachel could be proud of. Day by day, Thomas continued to change, gradually distancing himself from the negative influences in both his work and his life. He no longer participated in closed-door meetings or shady transactions. He spent time with his family, engaged in charitable activities, and began to focus more on the true values in life. He was no longer merely the man behind credit cards and large contracts. He wanted to become a person who could look someone in the eye and say that he had changed. Rachel felt as if she had entered a phase of her life where everything she had ever longed for stood before her like brilliant rays of light promising a new future. Yet deep within her soul, she still felt conflicted, as though torn between two worlds. On one side, the freedom she had craved for so long, and on the other, an increasingly complicated relationship with Thomas. Everything in her life seemed to revolve around this decision, and she knew that any choice would come at a price. One spring morning, as gentle sunlight filtered through the window of her small room in her parents' house, Rachel's phone suddenly rang. It was an unknown number. She answered, and on the other end was a warm voice introducing herself as the manager of a small but renowned restaurant. "Hello, Rachel. I am Linda. the manager of La Maison restaurant. We would like to invite you to be our head chef. Rachel fell silent, her mind spinning for a moment. This was the opportunity she had always dreamed of, becoming the head chef at a prestigious restaurant, where she could unleash her creativity and develop the dream that had long been set aside. But that also meant she would have to give up everything she had once known, including the life she had built and, of course, the complicated relationship with Thomas. We have been following you for some time and are truly impressed with your talent. We believe you are the right person to take our restaurant to a new level, Linda continued, making Rachel's heart beat even faster. An indescribable joy welled up within her. It was her dream to be a head chef, to lead a restaurant where she could indulge her passion for cooking and create unique dishes. Yet it also left her feeling conflicted because of what she already had with Thomas. Rachel sat down in an armchair, still clutching her phone. She looked out the window, where a gentle breeze brushed through billowing white clouds. Everything in the space became blurred, as if she were standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to choose. Meanwhile, images of Thomas continued to appear in her mind. She recalled the moments they had shared, peaceful breakfasts in the spacious kitchen of the mansion, surreal evenings at high society events. She could not deny that she had gradually felt something truly sincere from him, even though he had started their relationship with a completely different intention. But were his words truly heartfelt, or merely attempts to soothe the wounds he had inflicted upon her? Rachel could never forget the day she received the recipe book that Thomas had given her. That gift had ignited within her the hope of realizing her dream of becoming an exceptional chef. It served as a reminder of what she was capable of, and of the dreams she had forgotten while struggling through a busy and difficult life. She vividly remembered the image of Thomas handing her the book, his eyes full of sincerity and care. Rachel, I know you can do this. I just want to help you get the opportunity you deserve. Those words echoed in her mind, and even if she wished to reject what he had offered, that feeling still made her heart beat faster. In those moments, she received not only a material gift, but also the trust that he had placed in her. Yet the inner conflict within her grew ever more apparent. She thought about La Maison restaurant, where an opportunity lay open before her, and about her own future. She had once dreamed of being a head chef, but now that the opportunity had arrived, it also brought with it a major question. Could she leave behind everything she had with Thomas to pursue a dream that had once been neglected? Rachel looked at the recipe book once more, carefully flipping through its pages. The recipes she had once dreamed of experimenting with were now becoming part of her life. Thomas had helped her realize this, but could she accept him again? Could she embark on a new life? A life of freedom where she could control her own destiny, rather than living in the shadow of a wealthy man with endless secrets. In the end, she knew that this was the most important moment of her life. Her relationship with Thomas could be an opportunity to rediscover love and trust, but it could also lead to a life riddled with secrets and pain. Meanwhile, La Maison restaurant represented a real opportunity for her to stand on her own 2 feet and no longer depend on anyone else. With this decision, she had to choose the path that would lead her to a happy future. But would returning to Thomas be the right choice? Could love conquer all, or would she have to give up her dreams in order to find peace? Rachel felt that she had entered a stage in her life where everything she had ever longed for stood before her like brilliant rays of light promising a new future. Yet deep within her soul, she still felt conflicted, as if torn between 2 worlds. On one side, the freedom she had long yearned for, and on the other, an increasingly complicated relationship with Thomas. Everything in her life seemed to revolve around this decision, and she knew that any choice would come at a cost. One spring morning, as gentle sunlight filtered through the window of her small room in her parents' house, Rachel's phone suddenly rang. It was an unknown number. She answered, and on the other end, a warm voice introduced itself as the manager of a small but renowned restaurant. "Hello, Rachel. I am Linda, the manager of La Maison restaurant. We would like to invite you to be our head chef." Rachel fell silent, her mind spinning for a moment. This was the opportunity she had always dreamed of, becoming the head chef at a prestigious restaurant, where she could unleash her creativity and develop the dream that had long been set aside. But that also meant she would have to give up everything she had been attached to, including the life she once knew. And of course, the complicated relationship with Thomas. We have been following you for some time and are truly impressed with your talent. We believe you are the right person to elevate our restaurant to a new level, Linda continued, causing Rachel's heart to beat even faster. A joy beyond description welled up within her. It was her dream to be a head chef, to lead a restaurant where she could indulge her passion for cooking and create unique dishes. Yet it also made her feel conflicted because of what she already had with Thomas. Rachel sat down in an armchair, still clutching her phone. She looked out the window, where a gentle breeze brushed through billowing white clouds. Everything in the space became hazy, as if she were standing at a crossroads, uncertain which path to choose. Meanwhile, images of Thomas continued to appear in her mind. She recalled the moments they had shared, the peaceful breakfasts in the spacious kitchen of the mansion, the surreal evenings at high society events. She could not deny that she had gradually felt something truly sincere from him, even though he had started their relationship with a completely different purpose. But were his words truly heartfelt, or merely soothing the wounds he had inflicted upon her? Rachel could never forget the day she received the recipe book that Thomas had given her. That gift had ignited within her the hope of fulfilling her dream of becoming an exceptional chef. It was a reminder from him of what she could achieve, of the dreams she had forgotten when she was caught up in a busy and difficult life. She remembered vividly the image of Thomas handing her the book, his eyes full of sincerity and care. "Rachel, I know you can do this. I only want to help you get the opportunity you deserve." Those words echoed in her mind, and even if she wanted to reject what he had offered, that feeling still made her heart beat faster. It seemed that in those moments, she received not only a material gift but also the trust he had placed in her. Yet the inner turmoil within her grew ever more distinct. She thought about La Maison, where the opportunity was unfolding before her, and she pondered her own future. She had once dreamed of being a head chef, but now that the opportunity had arrived, it also brought a major question. Could she leave behind everything she had with Thomas to pursue a dream that had long been sidelined? Rachel looked at the recipe book once more, carefully flipping through its pages. The recipes she had once dreamed of experimenting with were now becoming a part of her life. Thomas had helped her realize this, but could she accept him once again? Could she embark on a new life? A life of freedom, where she could control her own destiny, rather than living in the shadow of a wealthy man with endless secrets. In the end, she knew that this was the most important moment of her life. Her relationship with Thomas could be an opportunity to rediscover love and trust, but it could also lead to a life filled with secrets and pain. Meanwhile, La Maison was a genuine opportunity for her to stand on her own 2 feet and no longer depend on anyone else. With this decision, she had to choose the path that would lead her to a happy future. But would returning to Thomas be the right choice? Could love conquer all, or would she have to give up her dreams to seek peace? Rachel stood before the towering iron gate of the Reed mansion, a feeling of anxiety creeping into her heart. Last night, she was still a waitress in a small cafe, struggling with every meager paycheck. Now, with just one decision, she was about to step into a world of luxury she had never dared to dream of. But amid the sparkling lights of this world, she could not shake the feeling of alienation and suffocation. A luxurious car carrying Rachel rolled along a road paved with white gravel, leading to an elegant mansion hidden behind a row of tall maple trees. The gleaming marble columns and the exquisite sculpted statues lining the entrance made her feel as if she were stepping into a fairy tale palace. The heavy main door swung open, revealing a vast hall with a high ceiling and a gigantic crystal chandelier casting a dazzling glow throughout the space. An elderly butler, with a dignified demeanor and an immaculate uniform, bowed as he greeted Rachel. "Welcome, Miss Miller. Please follow me. Your room has been prepared." Rachel silently followed him, her new high heels making her feet ache. Previously, she was only accustomed to sneakers or flat shoes when working at the cafe. Every step on the marble floor echoed in the expansive space, making her feel even more awkward. Her bedroom was on the 2nd floor, with a large glass window overlooking an expansive garden. Lush green trees, a clear pond, and a greenhouse full of brilliant flowers. The room was decorated with luxurious furnishings, a large silk-covered bed, gold-plated bedside lamps, and a gigantic wardrobe. Rachel stood silently in the middle of the room, feeling like a lost soul. Shortly thereafter, a group of female servants appeared, wearing designer dresses that she had only ever seen on magazine covers. A young girl with a professional smile said, "We have prepared the outfits for you. Mr. Reed wants you to choose a dress for tonight's party." Rachel looked at the dresses neatly arranged on the bed. Bright red, deep blue, mysterious black. All were so foreign to her simple style. She remembered the old uniform from the cafe, where she once felt comfortable and at home. For the first time, she realized that this change was not just about material things, but a complete transformation of identity. After a moment of hesitation, Rachel chose a modest cream-colored dress. A servant helped her put it on, adjusting every little detail. The dress hugged her figure perfectly, but when she looked at herself in the mirror, Rachel felt as if she were looking at someone else, a stranger, no longer the simple cafe waitress. That evening, Thomas appeared at her door, dressed in a sleek black suit. His gaze swept over Rachel, and a look of satisfied approval briefly appeared on his lips. "You look wonderful. Are you ready?" Rachel took a deep breath, trying to reassure herself. "I'm not so sure anymore. I feel like I'm playing a role that doesn't belong to me." Thomas tilted his head, studying her. "You don't need to become someone else, Rachel. Just be yourself, but a better version. Let me help you get acquainted with this world." The dinner party was held in a grand ballroom where the powerful and wealthy gathered. Elegant ladies in magnificent dresses, gentlemen with glasses of wine in hand, conversing with a confident and somewhat aloof tone. Rachel felt all eyes turned to her, scrutinizing her every move. She walked beside Thomas, feeling like a sparrow lost among proud peacocks. An older woman with sharp eyes approached them. "Thomas, my dear, who is this?" Her tone was more curious than friendly. Thomas smiled and naturally placed his hand on Rachel's waist. "This is Rachel, my fiancée. She is very special." Rachel pursed her lips, trying to maintain a smile. She clearly felt the scrutinizing gaze of those around her. They didn't have to say it, but she understood. They didn't believe she belonged in this world. The dinner passed heavily. Rachel was cautious with every word and gesture, yet she still felt out of place. When the party ended, she sighed with relief as she returned to her room. Looking at herself in the mirror, Rachel wondered, "What am I doing here? Can I really live in this world?" But then she remembered the money enough to change her life. Remembered the dream of owning her own restaurant that she had buried for so many years. If this was the price she had to pay to escape poverty, perhaps she would learn to adapt. And so, the cafe waitress began her journey to becoming the wife of a millionaire. A journey full of challenges she had never imagined.
The content of this story has been edited by our editorial team, based on a true story. The names of the characters have been changed to protect their privacy and identity.